We now welcome Phil Steele onto the YouTube channel. We're excited to connect with Phil, who is a college football expert on just about every team in the country. Phil, thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, a real pleasure, Bennett. I do a lot of radio shows during the course of the year, and we're usually talking about top 10 and SEC, Big Ten. So it's always good to talk Sun Belt.
Yeah, we're excited to talk JMU and Sun Belt. I do want to start just with the magazine overall. I think it's the best college football preview magazine in the country. I've been diving into it the last few weeks. A lot of great detail there. For people who do not have their magazine yet, how can they go about getting it?
Yeah, and the magazine is 360 pages, and I feel it's like getting 136 media guides rolled into one. Everything you need to know about any of the 136 teams is in there. Now, it's exclusively at two brick and mortar stores. That's Barnes and Noble and Books a Million. So if you're out and about looking for it, don't go to grocery stores or anything like that. Barnes and Noble, Books a Million are your two exclusive dealers for the magazine, or you can go online to philsteele.com. And when you go to philsteele.com, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge because it costs to ship things, but we give you the digital magazine absolutely free. And the digital magazine's actually updated all the way through September. So the three ways to get it: Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, or philsteele.com.
Awesome. I can't recommend it enough. I love the JMU preview. So we'll start there with the Dukes. You mentioned them as your Sun Belt East favorite. Seems like you, regardless of which quarterback they have, Alonzo Barnett, Matt Sluka, or Camden Coleman, you're confident in the Dukes. What is it about the roster that you really like this year?
Well, there's a lot to like about it. I think when you go position by position, they've got arguably the best talent in the Sun Belt Conference. You start at quarterback, and while Barnett is a big time question mark coming into the year, Sluke is a guy that's run this offense with Chesney back at Holy Cross 2 years ago, knows the offense well. And then, as you mentioned, Cam Coleman, you look at the running backs. Petway and Aday are two outstanding running backs. In fact, I rated the number 38 running back core in the country, best set of running backs in the Sun Belt Conference. They've got all conference right tackle returning and Pat McMurtry, and defensively they're solid throughout. The big thing I see from this year to last year is last year they lost so much talent to Indiana, and it was a very young and inexperienced team. You had a first year head coach in Bob Chesney, and whenever I talk to the coaches, Bennett, and go over teams with them, all second year head coaches say, "Oh, it's night and day this year. We were learning the players last year. Now the players know us inside and out. They know the systems, and everybody talks about that." Well, it's a second year for Chesney, and that's a big plus. Plus, they're more experienced this year. And, I mentioned defense. You got Emmanuel Bush at nose guard, Hendrick and Barksdale at the linebacker and nickelback positions. This is a very talented team. I think they should get there and win the Sun Belt this season.
Yeah, a lot of depth, as you mentioned, a lot of confidence there. I know you had a conversation with Chesney. I think you'd put on social media that he had mentioned to you in your conversation that Barnett is ahead of schedule in his recovery. I was curious if you had any, I guess, insights there. It sounds like he's progressing well with his knee injury. Is that correct?
That is correct. When I talked to Coach Chesney, that's what he said, and that's why he's a returning starter. Chances are he could start this year. So I listed him number one in the magazine because of that. You think coming off an injury like that, it's probably going to be Sluka, but we'll see. As
Yeah.
mentioned, Coach Chesney did tell me he was running ahead of schedule.
Yeah, it's an interesting battle for sure. And I was curious the rest of the East. There's obviously uncertainty with App State and Marshall, a lot of turnover there. I think you had Georgia Southern as the number two team. Who are some of the other, I guess, competitors you think will give the Dukes a run in the division?
Yeah, I think the main competitors for James Madison this year start with Georgia Southern. Clay Helton's doing a tremendous job building this team. I can't, you go back to his first year, 2022. I have seen teams go from the option to a pure passing offense, and it hasn't been pretty ever. And yet he did that in his first year, and they had a great year. They threw for 329 yards that season, and got to a bowl game. Once again, they got to a bowl game the next year, a couple of 6 and 7 seasons. Then last year, Coach Helton told me this is the best team I've had, and they were 8-5 at the end of the year. This year, once again, Coach Helton feels it's the best team he's had. So 4 years he's been putting it in. He's number 29 on my experience chart. This team is J.C. French at quarterback. And I do like the defense. They've got a couple of key additions in there. They didn't hit the portal as hard as they did the previous year, and I think that's a plus for them this year. You look at Old Dominion and Ricky Ronnie. Ricky Ronnie's had two really surprising years, 2021, 2023. I expected very little from Old Dominion. Both times they made it to a bowl game. Last year they were very close to a bowl game. At one point in the year, they knocked off Texas State. They blew out Georgia Southern, beat Georgia State on the road, knocked off a bowl team in Bowling Green on the road. They just played a really tough schedule. Teams like South Carolina, East Carolina, Virginia Tech in the non-conference slate. I think they're a threat this year. It's the best team that Ricky Ronnie's had in it's basically his fifth year, and Colton Joseph at QB. With App State, they always have good talent there, and Dowell Loggains will get the most out of it. And I like, going over the roster with them. I felt pretty good
Yeah.
about this year's roster. So I think App State's going to be a lot closer to what they had been. I don't know if he can get that done in his first year, turn them back into complete contenders, but they would be the fourth team in the East that I think would have an outside shot at contending for the East.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. I know Marshall, Sun Belt champion last year. A lot of their players now on Southern Miss. What did you see from them in terms of roster turnover? Are you expecting more of a rebuild for Marshall maybe than App State?
Yeah, definitely. And, with Tony Gibson, you hit it right on the head going over the two rosters with Marshall and Southern Miss. There are more players the top players from last year's Marshall team that won the Sun Belt Conference on Southern Miss this year than there are on Marshall. They have just two starters back on offense, two on defense. It's basically a brand new team trying to mold all these players together and a first year head coach on top of it. To me, that's going to be an extreme struggle. If there's ever a call for a rebuilding team, they're number 134 on my experience chart this year. It would be Marshall. And if you're thinking, hey, Marshall was the defending Sun Belt champ last year, that more applies to Southern Miss this year.
Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy roster turnover there. In the West, I saw you had Louisiana and Texas State as sort of your top two teams, which I think is interesting for JMU fans because those are the two West teams on the Dukes' schedule. What is it about Louisiana and Texas State that makes them sort of the preseason West frontrunner?
Well, Louisiana had a great year last year. They got to 10-2. They had a lot of big wins, and then boom, the bottom fell out in the postseason when they got blown out by Marshall, and a depleted team got lost to TCU. But I like Walker Howard, who they have coming in at quarterback. Walker Howard was actually one of the top quarterbacks coming out of high school. Signed at LSU as my PS number 4 rated QB. And was at Ole Miss last year. I think he's going to step in and do extremely well. I love the running back core with Zylan Perry and Bill Davis. They get, Perry gives you the explosiveness and Davis as well. This is really good unit at running back. And defensively, they're strong throughout. They've got a lot of returning starters on defense this year. So I think Louisiana, they get Texas State at home, which is the reason I gave them the slight favorite nod there. And with Texas State, I know they were 4-4 in the Sun Belt last year, despite the fact they were preseason favorite coming in. But remember, they blew out UTSA. They were leading Arizona State 21-7. That Arizona State team was pretty good. And if you look at Sun Belt play, they actually outgained their Sun Belt opponents by 134 yards per game, but finished 4-4. I think that's a good sign. That means they weren't being dominated at the line of scrimmage. They're actually better than their final record last year. Kinney's had back-to-back 8-win seasons. That's the first time that's happened at Texas State since 1981 and 82. There are a lot of new faces. But that's been the case in both of G.J. Kinney's years so far. And I think they hit the transfer portal well again this year, enough to contend in the West.
Awesome. Big picture G5. I was curious. I think your magazine had Boise State as a top 15 team. You've got Memphis pretty high up as well. Who are some of those teams you think in the G5 alongside maybe JMU and some others in the Sun Belt that'll compete to get themselves in the college football playoff?
Yeah, and it really is wide open. I could make a
Yeah.
case for any of the G5 conferences making a run at the playoff spot. For Liberty, it would have to be an undefeated season. Everybody else have two losses because of their schedule. It's extremely light, but they're capable, and Coach Chadwell's doing a good job there. In the Sun Belt, as we talked about, James Madison, and if Louisiana or Texas State has a big year and knocks off James Madison, they would have a shot at the playoff berth. You do have to look at Boise. Yes, Ashton Genty's now in the NFL, but Boise's still loaded with talent. They've got their quarterback back from last year, a loaded defense, and they're going to be favored in every game, with the exception of Notre Dame. But if your one loss is against Notre Dame on the road, that's not really going to hurt you as far as the playoff chase goes. And then you look at the MAC. Toledo is a team that went into SEC country and actually dominated Mississippi State at the line of scrimmage last year. Had a couple of tough losses, including the week after beating Mississippi State, a game they blew a lead. But I think Toledo's got that opportunity. If they knock off Kentucky early, they would have a shot at an unbeaten season this year. So those are all teams from the group of five that I think have a shot at making the playoff this year. And then you go to the American Conference, and you touched on it, Memphis. Last year Memphis was the trendy pick by everybody. I had Boise to make the playoff last year. But Memphis had to play their three toughest games on the road last year. Well, this year they're much better at home, and they get their three toughest games at home. So I think Memphis has that opportunity this year to have a big season, even losing their quarterback.
Yeah, they look like they'll be pretty good. JMU schedule, you mentioned Liberty. They've got Liberty on there. They also have that Louisville game and Washington State. I think fans are excited about the non-conference schedule. Does anything stand out from that trio, Louisville, Washington State, and Liberty, that JMU fans should be aware of, I guess, going into the season?
I would say all three of those games are going to be good. I favor James Madison more against Washington State than I do in the other two. Washington State's still looking like a little bit of a rebuilding thing. They're going to be going back to their conference next year, but they just lost their head coach. I actually have James Madison about a 10-point favorite in that game. Now, at Louisville, at Liberty, those are the two keys. If James Madison can pull those off on the road against two really good teams, and I didn't pick Louisville high in the ACC because they have a tough schedule, but Louisville is one of the best teams in the ACC. Wins in those two games, and then Liberty winning the rest of their games, and Louisville contending for the ACC, and you're a James Madison fan, you could start thinking legitimately about the playoff this year.
Yeah, that would be an exciting possibility for sure. I also wanted to ask about the defense for JMU specifically. They lost some good players. Eric O'Neill in the transfer portal is one that stands out. Jacob Dobbs and then Terrence Spence to graduation. But you still seem pretty high on the defense. I was curious your conversations with Coach Chesney and looking at the defense. What is it about the unit that still, I guess, brings a lot of confidence for the coaching staff and yourself?
Well, you look at the secondary, they lose a lot of players, but they did bring in a ton of guys in the secondary. Elijah Culp, Makai Rogers, Curtis Harris Lopez, and even going Ken Willis, Chance Harley. So a lot of guys came in. I think they're going to mold a good secondary. I like the fact they're a little stouter up in the interior of the
Yeah.
defensive line. That's going to be a plus. I guess my biggest question mark on the entire defense, Bennett, would be the pass rush. And Coach Chesney did say the pass rush was a concern of his compared to last year. We know what James Madison's pass rush was last year with 41 sacks. Can they generate that same pass rush this year? Would probably be my biggest question mark on the defense.
Makes a ton of sense. Special teams, a lot of turnover there as well. I was interested your take on JMU's special teams unit with the kicker Noe Ruelas transferring, and then also Ryan Hansen, the punter last year, graduating.
Yeah, and there are definitely question marks there. And but last year they did allow two punt return touchdowns, and they add in Louisiana Tech's punter. So I think punter I'm okay with. A little concerned about the kicker spot, but I think overall it should be another decent season for the special teams.
And just a generic broad question. I'm curious, given the portal, how much turnover there is, how much different creating the magazine and going through this process is compared to maybe 10 years ago. What's it like for you to get a feel on some of these rosters, especially at the G5, where maybe there's a little less information out there on some guys?
Yeah, it's vastly different. It's a good thing I talk to the coaches. I almost every
Yeah.
year talk to every G5 coach and go over the roster with them. The problem this year was that second transfer portal. There's so many players that entered the portal or signed with the team in the winter and then left after the spring was over, for crying out loud. You're just moving team players left and right. And then with the second portal ending late April like it did, I had to wait to talk to the coaches until first of all, spring practice was over, and then the portal was closed. And then
Right.
once the portal was closed, I could talk to the coaches because I'm 2 years ago, I talked to some coaches prior to the portal closing. They told me how high they were on players, and then boom, 5 days later, those players weren't on the team anymore. They got taken away. So then I couldn't really get my recap of the roster. So I tried to cram all 136 coaches into just the month of May, which made it pretty difficult, pretty hectic down the stretch. It used to be, Bennett, that, as you mentioned, 5, 10 years ago, spring practice is over. Some teams' springs ended the start of April, middle of April. I do my coaches' interviews at that point after spring was over. I could send this baby to the press at the end of May. Now I have to give it a full 5 weeks after the portal closes. We went to the press the first week of June this year. I'm hoping we go to one transfer portal window this year, and it's in January. I'm praying. If that happens, I'll be a happy guy, Bennett.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, I think everyone would kind of like a little bit less chaos. That'd be nice. But yeah, I would highly recommend your magazine. It's a great preview. And we talked about this last year, but it's one that I go back to, and I think a lot of others do during the season. It's not just a preview magazine in a sense, right? You can use it as a resource throughout the year, which I find super valuable.
Yeah, and I think everybody's magazine gets dog-eared by the end of the year. They almost use it every single day during the football season. And
Yeah.
like I mentioned, it's like getting 136 media guides rolled into one. But I appreciate those comments because we pour so much energy and work into this. 7 full months doing this magazine each and every year. So getting comments like that make it all worthwhile.
Awesome. Yeah, recommend everybody get that. Phil, thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, Bennett, always enjoy talking James Madison football with you. Thanks for having me on today.